let's get something clear before we go any further. This is not a video promising shortcuts. There is no secret blueprint, no hidden system, no guarantee that if you follow a checklist, everything suddenly works out. Anyone selling certainty about success is either lying to you or selling you something. What this video is about is something far less exciting, but far more powerful. How successful people think before success ever shows up. Because outcomes don't come first. Behavior doesn't come first. Even discipline doesn't come first. Mental models do. Most people fail not because they lack motivation, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they are operating with a framework that quietly works against them. They're making decisions with borrowed beliefs. They're measuring progress with the wrong metrics. They're solving surface problems instead of foundational ones. And no amount of hustle fixes that. This isn't about giving you a map that tells you exactly where to go. It's about helping you build the internal compass that lets you navigate uncertainty without falling apart. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Two people can receive the exact same advice, read the same books, work the same hours, and end up in completely different places. The difference is not effort, it's interpretation. How they interpret failure. How they interpret boredom, how they interpret discomfort, how they interpret responsibility. This video is designed to recalibrate that interpretation. Not by hype, not by motivation, but by patterns. Patterns that show up again and again in people who build strength, wealth, and freedom over long periods of time. Often quietly, often without recognition, often while being misunderstood. You won't hear promises here. What you'll hear are principles. So, let's begin. Principles that don't guarantee success, but without them, success almost never happens. If you're looking for fast results, this isn't for you. If you're looking for reassurance, this isn't for you. But if you're willing to question how you've been thinking, how you've been choosing, and how you've been reacting, then this might help you build something far more valuable than motivation. Clarity. And clarity changes everything. Most people believe success starts with discipline. It doesn't. It starts with where your energy goes. Early in life, many people make a subtle but costly mistake. They confuse responsibility with self-betrayal. They force themselves to become competent at things they quietly resent. They stay in roles that drain them, believing that suffering is proof of character. And overchimi. They mistake exhaustion for progress. But here's the reality most never hear. Getting good at something you hate doesn't make you strong. It makes you trapped. Skill compounds only when energy is present. Without energy, competence becomes a cage. This is why two people can put in the same hours and see wildly different outcomes. One feels pulled forward. The other feels pushed. The difference isn't talent, it's alignment. Energy is not motivation. It's not excitement. It's not even passion in the emotional sense. Energy is sustainable engagement. When you are aligned with the type of work you're doing, learning accelerates. Feedback sharpens instead of discouraging. Repetition builds momentum instead of resentment. That's where leverage is born. Leverage doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right things longer than most people can tolerate. And tolerance is emotional, not physical. People talk about grit as if it's about pain tolerance. In reality, it's about meaning tolerance. You can endure almost anything when it feels purposeful, but even small tasks become unbearable when they feel misaligned. This is why forcing yourself to master everything is a losing strategy. You don't need to be good at everything. You need to be exceptional at what moves the needle and competent enough to delegate the rest. The moment you understand this, your entire strategy shifts. Instead of asking, "What should I be doing?" you start asking, "What drains me and what strengthens me?" That question alone eliminates years of wasted effort, because leverage isn't about control. It's about focus. High performers aren't superhuman. They're selective. They protect their cognitive energy like a scarce resource, because it is. Every task you tolerate that drains you is stealing energy from something that could compound. Every obligation you accept without intention dilutes your leverage. This isn't about comfort. It's about efficiency. Misalignment doesn't just slow progress. It distorts judgment. When you're constantly drained, you make short-term decisions. You chase relief instead of results. You optimize for comfort instead of trajectory. And that's how people get stuck doing productive things that lead nowhere. True leverage emerges when effort, energy, and outcome align. That alignment allows you to learn faster, recover quicker, stay consistent longer, think more clearly under pressure, and once leverage exists, growth stops being linear. It becomes exponential. But none of that is possible if your energy is constantly leaking into the wrong containers. The first real step toward building anything meaningful isn't working harder. It's stopping the quiet self-sabotage of investing your best energy in the wrong places. Until that changes, no strategy will save you. Most people believe freedom means flexibility. In reality, flexibility without structure creates chaos. Your life is not shaped by your biggest goals. It's shaped by the systems you follow when motivation disappears. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They imagine discipline as force, white-knuckling habits, fighting impulses, constantly negotiating with themselves. But real discipline doesn't feel like fighting. It feels like removing friction. High-performing people don't rely on willpower. They build environments where the right behavior becomes the default. That starts with time. Time is the only resource that cannot be recovered, stored, or replaced. Yet most people treat it casually, reacting to whatever shows up next. They wake up at different times. They work in scattered blocks. They respond before they think. They allow interruptions to dictate their priorities. Over time, this creates a subtle erosion because every day you drift without intention. You send yourself the same message: I'm not in control. Structure reverses that message. Waking up at a consistent time isn't about productivity culture. It's about identity reinforcement. You are telling your nervous system that you are reliable, predictable, anchored. That stability compounds. When your days follow a rhythm, your mind stops wasting energy on constant recalibration. Focus deepens. Decisions become cleaner. Emotional swings soften. Structure doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. Without structure, creativity gets buried under noise. With structure, creativity has a container to expand safely. This is why people who appear calm under pressure often live highly structured lives. Self-respect grows the same way. It isn't built through confidence, affirmations, or motivation speeches. It's built through follow-through. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when no one is watching, you strengthen the internal signal that you can be trusted. Every time you don't, that signal weakens. Over time, this internal relationship becomes your ceiling. People with low self-respect struggle to hold boundaries. They overcommit. They react emotionally. They seek external validation, not because they're weak, but because their internal structure is inconsistent. Structure is not rigidity. It's alignment between intention and action. When your calendar reflects your values, life feels lighter. When it doesn't, everything feels heavier than it should. This is why sustainable success is rarely accidental. It's built on boring, repeatable actions that remove chaos before chaos shows up. Not glamorous, not exciting, but powerful. You don't need more time. You need fewer leaks. And those leaks almost always come from the absence of structure. Until time is treated with respect, progress remains fragile. Most people treat the body as something separate from success, almost like an accessory. They believe results come from mindset, strategy, intelligence, or effort, and that the body is just along for the ride. That belief quietly limits everything. The body is not a side character in your life. It's the interface through which every decision, emotion, and action. Your energy level determines your patience. Your patience determines your judgment. Your judgment determines your outcomes. This is why two people can face the same challenge and respond completely differently. One stays calm and deliberate. The other becomes reactive, impulsive, and overwhelmed. The difference is in character. It's capacity. A depleted body reduces your tolerance for friction. Small problems feel bigger. Delays feel personal. Discomfort feels threatening. Over time, this leads to poor decisions that look like personality flaws, but are actually biological signals being ignored. Most people don't lack ambition. They lack physical margin. Margin is the space between what is required of you and what your system can comfortably handle. When that margin disappears, everything feels urgent, and urgency destroys perspective. This is why health doesn't just improve life, it stabilizes it. Strength training, movement, proper nutrition, and recovery aren't about appearance. They are about resilience. A resilient body absorbs stress without collapsing. A fragile body amplifies stress until everything feels unmanageable. Focus works the same way. Cognitive clarity is not just a mental skill, it's a physiological state. Sleep-deprived, underfueled, overstimulated systems cannot think long-term. They default to survival logic. That's when people abandon plans, break commitments, and self-sabotage. Not because they don't care, but because their system is overloaded. You can't outthink a neglected body. This is why sustainable success looks calm from the outside. The calm isn't luck, it's regulation. People who take care of their bodies recover faster from setbacks. They don't spiral as deeply. They don't panic as quickly. They maintain optionality. Optionality is power. When your body functions well, you can say no without fear. You can wait without anxiety. You can endure boredom without escaping into distractions. That creates an unfair advantage. Most people are negotiating with exhaustion all day. The person with energy is operating on a different plane. This isn't about extremes. It's about consistency. You don't need perfect routines. You need reliable ones. Movement that happens even when motivation doesn't. Food that fuels instead of numbs. Recovery that is treated as strategic, not indulgent. The body responds to patterns, not intentions. And once the body is stable, everything else compounds faster. Discipline becomes easier. Focus lasts longer. Emotional control strengthens, not because you became a different person, but because your system finally supports who you trying to be. Ignoring the body doesn't make you tougher. It makes success more expensive than it needs to be, and most people pay that price without realizing it. Very few people consciously choose the environment that shapes them. Most simply, adapt to the one they inherit. An adaptation, while useful for survival, is dangerous for growth. Your environment doesn't just influence your behavior, it filters what feels normal, possible, and reasonable. This is why two people with similar abilities can end up with radically different financial lives. Not because one is smarter, but because one is surrounded by higher expectations. Social psychology has a name for this: normative pressure. But you don't need theory to feel it. You feel it every time you hesitate to talk about ambition. Every time you downplay your goals to avoid standing out. Every time you adjust your desires to match the emotional comfort of the room. Most people don't quit on their dreams. They quietly resize them. And the most powerful force behind that resizing is social feedback. Humans are wired for belonging. Long before success mattered, survival depended on acceptance. That wiring never disappeared. It just moved into modern environments. If the people around you treat financial growth as risky, selfish, or unrealistic, your nervous system registers ambition as danger. Not logically, biologically. This creates internal conflict. On one side, the desire to grow. On the other, the fear of social friction. Most people resolve that conflict by choosing comfort. They don't fail financially because they lack information. They fail because their environment makes long-term thinking feel unsafe. Environment, I assentejas paraply. It's language. It's habits. It's what gets rewarded and what gets mocked. If spending is celebrated and investing is ignored, your behavior will follow the reward. If complaining is normalized and accountability is rare, your standards will erode. Over time, this shapes economic identity. People begin to see money not as a tool, but as a source of stress, guilt, or comparison. That mindset doesn't stay abstract. It directly impacts earning, saving, risk tolerance, and opportunity recognition. Prosperity requires psychological space. Space to think long-term. Space to delay gratification. Space to endure temporary misunderstanding. And that space is difficult to maintain in environments that punish ambition. This is why strategic distance often precedes financial growth. Not isolation, but selective exposure. People who build wealth intentionally curate their inputs. They limit conversations that reinforce scarcity. They seek environments where growth is expected, not questioned. Not because they are better, but because they understand that beliefs are contagious. The moment your environment shifts, your internal dialogue shifts with it. Suddenly, discipline feels reasonable. Long-term planning feels normal. Investing time and resources feels justified. This isn't coincidence. It's conditioning. Financial prosperity is not built in isolation, but it also cannot survive in hostile environments. If the people around you don't respect focus, your focus will decay. If they don't respect delayed rewards, you'll feel pressure to cash out early. And if they don't respect growth, you'll subconsciously sabotage your own progress to stay connected. The hardest part of changing your financial trajectory isn't learning new skills. It's tolerating the temporary discomfort of outgrowing familiar environments. But that discomfort is not a sign of danger. It's a signal that your standards are rising. Financial outcomes are rarely destroyed by bad decisions. They are slowly eroded by unclear standards. Most people think boundaries are about protecting time or energy, and self-trust is the foundation of long-term prosperity. When you repeatedly allow small violations of your standards, something subtle happens. You don't just lose time, you lose authority over yourself. Every ignored agreement, every tolerated disrespect, every commitment you quietly abandon, each one sends a signal inward. My word doesn't carry weight. That signal compounds. People with weak financial discipline often believe their problem is knowledge. It usually isn't. It's credibility with themselves. Markets reward consistency. Investments reward patience. Business rewards follow through. But none of those can exist if your internal standards fluctuate with emotion. This is why boundaries aren't aggressive. They're clarifying. When you clearly define what you accept, you reduce decision fatigue. You remove negotiation. You eliminate ambiguity. Ambiguity is expensive. It leaks money through impulsive spending. It leaks opportunity through hesitation. It leaks leverage through people who sense inconsistency. People don't respond to what you say. You value. They respond to what you enforce. That applies to time. It applies to attention. And it applies directly to money. If you don't set standards around how your time is used, others will spend it for you. If you don't set standards around your availability, you'll be reactive instead of strategic. And if you don't set standards around money, you'll drift financially while staying busy. Drift feels harmless in the short term. In the long term, it's devastating. Self-trust grows when standards are upheld quietly, consistently, and privately. Not when things are easy, but when discomfort appears. Saying no when there's pressure to say yes. Walking away when it would be easier to stay. Delaying gratification when impulse offers relief. Each of these moments strengthens internal alignment. That alignment creates confidence. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind. The kind that allows you to wait, to negotiate without desperation. To walk away from short-term gains that compromise long-term trajectory. Financial independence requires this type of confidence. Without it, people chase approval, status, Or urgency. They make decisions to feel better now and pay for them later. Boundaries create economic patience. And patience is a form of power. This is why people with strong financial foundations often appear unemotional about money. They aren't detached. They're regulated. They've removed chaos from the decision-making environment. Their standards are already decided. They don't need to debate every expense. They don't renegotiate every commitment. They don't outsource their priorities to external pressure. That clarity compounds into trust from partners, clients, opportunities, and markets. But it starts internally. If you don't respect your own standards, no external success will feel stable. You'll always feel one decision away from collapse. True financial stability is built when boundaries stop being reactions and become identity. At that point, money stops controlling behavior and starts responding to it. Most people want financial freedom. Very few want financial responsibility. That disconnect explains almost everything. Responsibility is often misunderstood as restriction. In reality, it's direction. When responsibility is absent, life feels lighter in the short term, but heavier over time. Bills accumulate, decisions pile up. Options shrink. True responsibility doesn't arrive as pressure from the outside. It emerges internally when you stop outsourcing your future to chance, trends, or circumstances. At that point, money stops being emotional and starts becoming strategic. Short-term thinking feels natural to the human brain. Evolution optimized us for survival now, not prosperity later. But financial growth requires something unnatural: the ability to delay reward without resentment. That ability only develops when responsibility becomes identity. People who never internalize responsibility, they respond to expenses instead of anticipating them. They chase opportunities instead of building positioning. They confuse movement with progress. Progress, in financial terms, is rarely visible day to day. It shows up quietly, in lower stress, in optionality, in the ability to say not yet. This is why responsibility and long-term vision are inseparable. You cannot hold a long-term financial vision if your behavior is optimized for short-term relief. Every impulse purchase, every rushed decision, every emotional reaction pulls future value into the present and leaves future you underfunded. Responsible individuals reverse that flow. They fund the future first. Not just with money, but with skills, reputation, capital allocation, energy management. They understand something most people miss. Money is not just a resource, it's a signal amplifier. It magnifies discipline. It magnifies chaos. It magnifies character. This is why sudden wealth destabilizes people without internal structure. The problem isn't the money. It's the absence of long-term responsibility to hold it. When responsibility is present, financial decisions slow down. Not from fear, but from clarity. You stop asking how fast can this work, and start asking, will this still make sense in 5 years? That question alone filters out most bad decisions. Long-term responsibility also changes how you relate to risk. Irresponsible risk is emotional. Responsible risk is calculated, asymmetric, and patient. You accept short-term discomfort to buy long-term leverage. You invest before certainty. You prepare before urgency. You build margin before crisis. This mindset is rare, which is why it's rewarded. Markets don't reward intensity. They reward endurance. And endurance is built through responsibility practiced daily, quietly, and without applause. This is where many people lose motivation, because responsibility doesn't feel exciting. It feels boring, repetitive, unimpressive, until suddenly it isn't. Until the compound effect becomes visible, until stress decreases, until options expand. At that point, people call it luck. It isn't. It's delayed credit. Responsibility is how you claim ownership of your financial trajectory before the results show up. Without it, you'll always be negotiating with the future. With it, the future starts cooperating. Before the final chapter, one quick pause. If this kind of depth is valuable to you, leave a like. It signals that thoughtful, long-form content still matters. And if you want to keep sharpening how you think about discipline, money, and long-term success, subscribe and turn on notifications, because everything we've talked about so far only works if it's anchored to who you're becoming. At a certain level of maturity, financial growth stops being about income. It becomes about identity. Money begins to follow who you are, not what you want. This is where most advice fails. It stays at the level of tactics, while the real bottleneck is internal. Your identity determines what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you repeat in repetition is what builds wealth. People don't sabotage themselves because they lack discipline. They sabotage themselves because their self-image rejects consistency at higher levels. A person who sees themselves as trying will always act differently from someone who sees themselves as building. Trying is temporary. Building is structural. This distinction matters financially. You stop needing motivation. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop oscillating between extremes. Your actions become quieter and far more effective. Vision plays a critical role here. Without vision, money is reactive. It solves problems but doesn't create direction. With vision, money becomes architectural. You begin allocating resources based on future alignment, not present emotion. This is how financial legacies are formed, not through intensity, but through coherence. Legacy doesn't mean inheritance. It means continuity, a set of values, decisions, and standards that outlive short-term outcomes. People who think only in months manage cash flow. People who think in decades build systems. That difference shapes everything. Investment horizons, risk tolerance, career moves, relationship selection, identity, anchored in long-term vision, creates resilience. When setbacks happen, and while a person doesn't collapse emotionally, because the identity isn't tied to a single outcome. Short-term losses stop feeling personal. They become data. This emotional stability is rare and extremely valuable. It allows you to stay in the game longer than others. And staying in the game is one of the most underrated financial advantages. Most people don't fail because they make one catastrophic mistake. They fail because they quit after accumulating friction. Vision absorbs friction. It turns obstacles into expected costs, not signs of failure. This is also where pressure soci loses its grip. When identity is clear, external validation becomes optional. Approval stops being a currency. You can endure misunderstanding. You can move slowly. You can remain consistent without explanation. These traits don't look impressive early on, but they compound relentlessly. Financial legacy is built when daily decisions align with a future that feels real enough to influence behavior now. That future doesn't need to be detailed. It needs to be stable. Stability creates patience. Patience creates leverage. Leverage creates prosperity. Eventually, money stops being the focus. It becomes a tool for autonomy, impact, continuity at that stage. Wealth feels quieter, but far more powerful because it's no longer fragile. It's integrated, and when identity, vision, and capital move in the same direction, financial success stops being chased. It becomes inevitable.